Hey, what's up? It's Matt Busch hanging out in the Speed Paint Lounge. And my commentary here is going to be a little bit more informal than some of the other videos that you've seen me do, but I think I'll just be able to run loose and kind of just talk about everything and really get into the nitty-gritty, as they call it. So, Mayra Veronica here. In case you don't know who she is, I was contacted by Mayra herself to do a couple paintings for her that would be a style guide for some animated project that she was doing. I'm not even sure if anything came of it. But anyway, if you don't know who she is, she's like a Latin diva. I had never heard of her before, but apparently she is the biggest Latin sensation in the world. But apparently overseas, for the U.S. troops, she's the #1 most requested performer, and she is a cutie, that's for sure. First of all, I start with doing a penciled image. I'm not really going to get into that since this is the Speed Paint Lounge, but the only thing I can say right off the bat is, a lot of times when we do a painting, we're just so excited to kind of get into the painting that we kind of gloss over doing a drawing. What I can't stress enough is doing the best drawing that you can right off the bat, because sometimes your drawing will show through depending on the painting technique that you're doing. But also, the better drawing you do, the better painting that you'll have. It's not really rocket science. So the first step for my speed painting here is I add in my darkest darks. Now you can see here that I'm using a fine point Sharpie to do this. Normally I would go in with black paint, or a lot of times I'll just use gesso, black gesso, straight out of the tube. And gesso is normally what you use to prime a canvas for oil paints, but it's actually acrylic paint. It's just a different consistency. I think it's a lot easier to work with. But for some reason here, I am using fine point Sharpies. And the reason why I'm assuming is because I had a tight deadline on these. I had to do them quick. One thing that's nice about it, it's a little bit more precise for a smaller piece, so I could be a little bit faster with it. The whole point of why I'm going in with my darkest darks is to separate contrast. And I think when you're doing a painting, if you just start with a big white board, right here I'm using Bristol board, but if you start with a big white board, the problem is that it's all white, and if you just start like painting in skin tones, you can't really judge your colors. You can't judge the values of the colors against white alone. So you've got the white of the board, and then if you put in your darkest darks, you suddenly have your full range of value in there, so it's a little bit easier to judge colors later. You can see that I'm using the ultra fine point Sharpie here for the small details, but then I'll go in later with a thicker Sharpie to color in darker areas, like you can see here. And sometimes I'll even, at this point, use gesso. If there are extremely large areas, it's a lot easier to do with a larger brush. Alright, with my darkest darks complete, now I'm ready to do washes, which is the next stage. Washes, what they are is, it's acrylic paint, and I usually mix them in little film canisters with water. The amount of paint that I mix in one of those little film canisters, I use the amount of paint that you would, like if you're squeezing it out of the tube, that you would put on a toothbrush, with toothpaste. And then I fill the rest of the film canister with water, so that's the consistency that I use. And I use the washes to paint in skin tones. I paint in the shadows. Later, I'm going to smooth over those areas with an airbrush. And I don't use a whole lot of airbrush in my work anyway, but for Mayra Veronica, because she's soft and silky and smooth, I was kind of planning ahead that I would use the airbrush transparent later. Here you can see I'm painting in the lips. There's not a lot of color going on here. So for this piece, I really wanted to keep it simple. The next step is airbrushing, and here you can see I'm being all goofy and dancing around. But I'm like that when I work. I'm usually being goofy, dancing around, and the Airbrush Stage is extremely quick. Essentially, all I'm doing is, as you can see here, I'm just adding in soft tone in a lot of places I want to get rid of the white so I can control my highlights later. And here you can see that I'm adding in subtle color. Again, didn't want to have a lot of color, but for some of the reflective areas in the couch that she's kind of sprawled on here, I wanted to have it purple. The real trick to my technique is actually after I've got the washes and airbrush done, and that is painting in my edges opaquely. And that kind of separates hard edges and soft edges because you want to have both. Here you can see I'm painting in like little highlights in the leather and like little buttons and stuff on her boots, and adding in here the white highlights is really the trick that gets that separation going. Here you can see I'm using white, but honestly, to whatever level you want to take it, you can use any color opaquely. For a lot of the sci-fi paintings that I do, if there's little robots or spaceships that have like little lights blinking and that sort of thing, I'll use a lot of different opaque colors to really get those lights to stand out. In this case, I pretty much used white straight out of the tube, but you want to be careful. Sometimes if you only use white opaquely, sometimes it can make the piece look a little forced and not have enough color in it. In this case, again, I was trying to be a little bit more simplified to have that look. It's all about edges, to get in the edge control. And this technique where, you've got your shadows in transparently and then you put in your highlights opaquely later, this is a technique that was done by all the masters, and I think it really kind of started during the Renaissance period. This is the technique that they would use. Obviously, they didn't have airbrushes back then, but they would do washes, they would do glazes of the shadows transparently, and then they would make the highlights on top. And it's kind of this idea of light is on top of shadow, and it sounds like it makes sense physically, but also visually it really works. It's just this really cool 3D technique. And there you have it. There is the lovely Mayra Veronica. Very saucy, and I appreciate you hanging out with me here in the Speed Paint Lounge. And I'll be back again soon with another painting. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And I'll go hang out and watch some other cool artists do some work. See ya!